So our theme today, or our theme this past 2 days, has been Dare to Be. And it really came from the idea that we're all living in unprecedented times, but yet we have people like everyone in this room, right, and the people in this panel who have been pushing through despite everything and are doing very, very interesting and amazing things, right? And so with that, I'd like to maybe let my panelists here today to just quickly introduce themselves first.
Hello, everyone. Great to be here. I'm Mahesh. I work with a firm called BlueOrchard, which is an impact investing firm focused on financial inclusion and climate resilience. I cover the Asia for them.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Oppenheimer. I am a philanthropist, a writer, and recently, together with Hector Bartlett, formed a African female founders fund called One Day Yes.
Thank you. My name is Jessica. I'm the founder and managing director of EcoBusiness. We're Asia Pacific's largest media and business intelligence company dedicated to sustainable development. Some of the other hats I wear, I work on the boards of companies and also in enabling sustainability innovation.
I'd like to start with Rebecca. Rebecca, you just mentioned you're a philanthropist, you're a writer, you're also an investor. Can you tell a little bit about the work that you're doing as each of these three hats?
Sure. So I think I'm just driven by a deep desire to address the inequality in our world. And I'm an African, I'm South African, and so I'm particularly passionate about my continent. And I come from a family that's blessed with great abundance, so I feel a responsibility in my soul to help equalize things. And so I do that in different ways. Some is backing other people's incredible dreams. With One Day Yes, it was understanding that women are the future and that we need to support them on our continent. And then as a writer, that's just a deep desire to express my heart.
And you mentioned you've been doing philanthropy for many, many years. How has that led you to One Day Yes and your time now as an investor? Or have they always gone hand in hand?
So I think probably the best way I can describe the way I do both or together perhaps is by giving you an example of a recent investment we made in the Sudan, which is in a card machine company where, there are about 50 million people in Sudan and there are only about 10,000 card machines. Visa and MasterCard don't exist in that market. And this is a brilliant founder who stepped into that gap. But if you were to assess that on kind of a regular risk profile, anybody would say to you, stay the hell away from Sudan. So then it's just about your passion about why am I doing this and do I believe that this could play a role in helping that country get onto its feet. And so then, that's where I suppose the two merge.
And Mahesh, you're an investor. BlueOrchard came from really years and years of microfinance background, and yet you're doing private equity now. So what is the relation of these two things, and what's the role of private equity in your mission in, your past mission in microfinance, for example?
Thanks. So BlueOrchard has been focused on financial inclusion for a long period of time. They started in early 2000s. That was before the word impact investment was probably coined. We have been driving financial inclusion, showcasing to our investors that we are delivering commercial returns while doing impact. And we gradually then moved into equity investments as well. One of the reasons we moved into equity investments and private equity is that as an equity investor, you get your investee companies to take a lot more risk and drive larger impact. You're also able to work closely with them to add value to the company. So I think that makes a significant difference. And given that we are very focused on financial services and insurance, we are able to bring on board a lot more expertise, knowledge on how these industries work, and help the companies grow much faster and deliver better returns.
You mentioned insurance and financial inclusion. Why insure tech and why financial inclusion?
Yeah, again, so I think on the financial inclusion side, I think this story has been clear for a long period of time. One of the best ways to kind of provide springboards for people to move out of poverty is to give them access to financial services. And it's surprising statistic when I see that even now, when you look at emerging markets, there is almost 1.7 billion unbanked individuals, right? So the kind of impact that you can have by providing them access to those services is huge. And that's a huge springboard for them. And a lot of these people have ideas, it's just the access to capital that they lack. On the insurance, it's an interesting question, and this is where our fund is very, very unique. The fund is called Insure Resilience Investment Fund, and the mandate of the fund is to drive climate resilience by using insurance as a tool. Essentially, the thesis is that whatever we do on climate change, there is going to be a 1 to 2 degrees centigrade increase in temperature. And because of that change, the people who are going to be most impacted are the people in emerging markets, especially the low and middle income people. So the objective of our fund is to reach out to these low and middle income people and get them access to insurance products, which could be a crop insurance for a farmer, which could be a home insurance or a business insurance for a small MSME or a household. So those are the things that we are trying to drive with this fund. And we have already deployed Fund 1. We are now investing out of Fund 2. We expect to reach about 30 million beneficiaries with the current fund.
Speaking of climate resilience, we've been talking about sustainability quite a lot during the last 2 days. In She Loves Tech competition, we've had a jump in number of sustainability startups as well, right? Around, I think, 50, 60%. That's a huge jump. There's been a lot of attention and awareness in the space, increased awareness in the space. And yet, Jessica, you've been working in this space for the last 2 decades, right? It's been a long time, and it's during a time when people didn't care about it. So I'm very curious, what propelled you at that time to get into the space when no others actually did?
Thank you very much, Rhea. And I just want to say a note of congrats to She Loves Tech for putting this on the agenda and for organizing this amazing conference. And I know that we stand between you guys and drinks, so really appreciate your time here with us as well. Going back to my journey, I suppose, as you mentioned, when I was a journalist at the Straits Times, which is a national newspaper here, and covering, the energy beat as well as politics and current affairs. And it was when I was, covering energy that I really understood what was happening with the climate crisis. And this was back in 2009, well, actually 2006, when I started. And I realized that nobody was talking about this issue, even though it was hugely important. And I think it was through that kind of journey that I realized that there was a place and a space for these issues to be debated in a very formal way, but in a very rigorous way as well. And that's when I started eco-business in 2009. And the early years were very, very difficult. I think everybody was like, what is sustainability? What is ESG? People regarded it as charity or CSR, which it is not. And I think that the great thing is it's evolved, over the years now to really take the place at the top of the agenda. I mean, this COP27 that's happening in Egypt right now, where they're debating, loss and damage, climate finance. And I'm just headed to Bali tomorrow for the G20 and the B20 summits, where the entire agenda is about recovering stronger as a global community. And I think against a backdrop of where we see geopolitical tensions, a war, an energy crisis, cost of living crisis, it's really, really difficult to keep your eye on these issues, climate crisis, social inequality, unless you're really determined and really intentional about it. And I think what's been great is that we've started to see the different sectors, and especially finance, starting to sit up and pay attention to these problems and actually see these crises and these challenges as an investment opportunity. And as a result, over the years, we've also built an ecosystem, not just the news, but we have an ESG intelligence practice that helps organizations and governments. But 6 years ago, we teamed up with Temasek Foundation to launch an initiative called the Livability Challenge. And it gives away $1 million every year to the top prize. But we have other VCs who come in and also provide investment opportunities. And we just launched last week the 2023 edition, where we're doubling the prize money now to $2 million. And it's a grant. We don't take any equity. It's really catalytic kinetic capital that enables companies at the pre-seed stage to take their ideas from the lab into the commercial markets. But I think that people are starting to see that it's not just a crisis we're talking about. This is actually a business opportunity.
First of all, that's amazing. I hope that we can introduce some of our own startups
Yes, please.
to the challenge. They definitely need more funding. But, Mahesh, Jessica was just talking about some of the defining moments of her getting into this space. And I'm wondering for you as well, you've been in a banking space for very long, right? And now you're doing climate resilience. Was there any trigger that made you decide to shift into this space and focus on climate resilience?
So, for a large part of my career, I've been working for 17 years. For the first 12 years, I was on the commercial private equity side, making regular commercial investments. But I always focused on consumer and health. And then I joined an impact investing firm, which was focusing on health. But I liked the approach that they took. In healthcare, if you look at the business models, the business model a lot of the times is around investing in large hospitals, then increasing the pricing at some point of time to drive returns, right? But the approach on the healthcare that the firm that I joined took was that will rely on making healthcare affordable, but will try to build profitability by driving volumes at affordable prices. And that sounded very interesting to me. So that's how I kind of stepped into the impact investing world. And then I joined another firm, now, which is BlueOrchard, where the focus has been on climate resilience and financial inclusion.
And Rebecca, for you with One Day Yes, what was the vision behind One Day Yes? And is there anything about your particular VC fund that you're doing differently compared to others, right? What is that gap that you're trying to fill?
Well, without overstating the obvious, I think this planet is in dire trouble largely because of patriarchy and profit seeking. So I think that women is a very obvious route out of that. So I think that, and particularly, on the African continent, I think women are the solution. And when you think that, so it's really that driver, that's where I think we can make the greatest impact, is supporting brilliant women, run brilliant initiatives, and change things from there. Yeah.
Has it been a difficult journey so far?
No, it's been absolutely amazing. And, we very much would love to be a fund that has women fund other women. And we're very, I think our difference is we're very deep on relationships, and we're not sort of fund-like in the sense that we're looking to the bottom line. We're really about building an ecosystem and everybody in it together, and we're in for the long haul. So, yeah.
We talk about unleashing our superpowers, right? And I'm actually curious, right? What is your superpowers? What are your superpowers?
Oh God, I would say that one of mine is boldness, but I think it comes from a sort of quite radical spiritual trust. And I do have to say that I think we live in a culture that vilifies feelings, and consequently the feminine in some aspect. And I think that it's having been in the head that we've got into trouble. And I think when people refer to humanity, I think they're just talking about the heart and having the courage to bring that into the equation. So for me, it's very much about, having the courage to align with what I think is right and follow it through, because I think then you open up to forces much bigger than yourself playing a role.
We've been talking a lot about feelings, I would say, right, these past 2 days as well. So we completely agree on that. And, Jessica, I know that you had your own personal journey as you built eco-business. And I'm wondering for you, what is your superpower?
Okay, I'm going to qualify that I don't have any superpowers first. But if you had to twist my arm, I suppose, that conviction, to kind of believe that you can see something that's coming and that is important, and then acting on that. And I think in my case, power, the skill I had was the power of the pen and using the media as a platform, as a fourth estate, to hold a mirror up to society and go, hey, you know, guys, these things are happening and it's happening on our watch. So what are we doing about that? And I think that you kind of need some courage, and I love the fact that the theme today is daring to be, so that certain boldness, as Rebecca had mentioned, in kind of executing that vision that you have. And I think that, you know, I've been fortunate, you know, that the issue obviously has risen on the agenda, and that many people, organizations and individuals along the way have seen how important this is, and it's now an ecosystem and a collective community that's working on these issues.
Speaking, I just want to, before I get to Mahesh, right, I want to ask, you mentioned about, you know, foreseeing the future, right, which you did. Now, 20 years later, people are actually talking about ESG, right, and now people care and putting in a lot of investments into ESG. But when you started to now, right, what's been the biggest shift that you've seen, especially in the companies that you work with, right? Is there any kind of practical change there? What's one thing that perhaps you can share with us? Yeah.
Yeah, no, thanks for that question. I think, you know, if we go back to when the corporate sustainability movement was born, that was like in the age of like 2005 when Kofi Annan launched this report at the United Nations called Who Cares Wins. And it was the first time that, you know, people had a discussion around the fact that there is the stakeholders that you need to look after, not just your shareholders. And it was very, very early days of that movement. And I think in the early years, like when ecobusiness was started, sustainability, ESG, sustainable development was very much seen as a charity CSR activity, you know, something that maybe your foundation did, you write a check, but it's absolutely not about that. And that is the biggest shift I've seen. And I do a lot of board work, so I speak to boards of organizations, and 5 years ago, they had absolutely no idea what these terms mean. Today, the boards are asking very, very astute questions around climate risk, around you know, stakeholder capitalism, around purpose, and all these issues are now coming to the fore because really we have been ignoring them for so long that we can't ignore them anymore. So I see that as a really encouraging movement, and that has been the biggest change actually.
And Mahesh, you're a superpower for us.
Just one of them.
Well, I don't have a superpower, but if I were to have a superpower, I wish it would be influencing the founders into doing what we want them to do, essentially. Because oftentimes we ask a lot of them and we ask them to take leaps which probably we ourselves would not take, and it has to be convincing enough. But I think a large part of the credit goes to our founders on what we are able to deliver. So that's the superpower that I would like to have.
All of us here, right, are largely enablers, right? Investing in startups that actually are creating a lot of impact. And you've committed a lot of your time the past years working in this space. I'm just curious if you can share with us some of the wins that you've seen, like over the course of you working, for example, in climate resilience. Jessica as well with your new sustainability challenge, right? And then Rebecca with One Day Yes. Have you seen any wins, or can you share some examples of startups that you felt the proudest, right? I was so happy that, you know, I was able to be part of this journey, and I was able to really create an impact as well through this particular startup. Mahesh?
Yeah, so we have invested in across the insurance value chain, right, from insurance companies to insurtechs, agri-tech, essentially anybody who can help us reach out to the end consumers and get them access to these insurance products. So one of the projects that I'm really looking forward to is a weather index insurance that one of the companies that we are about to invest in is about to launch, or has already launched. One of the biggest challenges with respect to insurance is claims. I mean, even educated people, when we had to find any kind of claim, whether it's a health insurance or life insurance, it's so difficult. And what we're trying to do is kind of make that easier for the farmer. So the index insurance, the farmer will never have to claim. Essentially, for the crop, we have decided there's a particular band in which the crop grows well, and if the rainfall is above that threshold or below that threshold, there's an automatic payment that is made to the farmer. So I think that will be a game changer in how insurance is pursued by farmers. I'm really looking forward to how that project scales up. We have invested in an Israeli agri-tech startup which is again, solve many things for farmers. They have very high-end tech with drones that helps farmers deliver better, improves their yield, but at the same time also helps them insure for any weather-related risk. It's a perfect example of providing the springboard to the farmers to help them improve their income, but at the same time providing the safety nets in case something goes wrong. And likewise, we have made a couple of investments in India which help us reach out to the rural community, because one of the challenges that we're trying to address is reach, distribution, accessibility. And these startups in India help us reach out to those end consumers in a much better way, because they have something called as a phygital model, where there's an agent on where they have the feet on street to reach out to these farmers, but they are enabled technologically. So those are the things that we are really proud of.
Must be challenging but very rewarding, right? These startups, we've seen a lot of agri-tech as well, like in She Loves Tech, and it's really difficult to digitize a largely non-digital environment, right? Industry as well. So, Rebecca, you were sharing some examples with us earlier.
Yeah, so I would say just with One Day, yes, we're too young. I'm confident that they're going to be super success stories, but I can tell you, one was a philanthropic, began as a philanthropic sort of investment, which was in a school called the African Leadership Academy, which began as a sort of international baccalaureate school to pool African students away from Europe and back onto the continent and be a stellar African institution. And that school has now gone on in a very prosperous way to have 5 universities on the continent, and it's gone from strength to strength. So that's something, a dream that began with philanthropy, but now has morphed into something very successful by itself.
Amazing, Jessica.
Yeah, when we started the challenge, we actually were not quite sure, what kind of deals we would get in the startups, but it's actually been a renaissance of innovation in the sustainability arena. In the first year, we had a company called RWDC that actually created a PHA material that replaced all single-use plastic. And then they went on to raise, I think now their latest fundraising was 200 million, but we provided like a very small amount of catalytic capital at the start that enabled that. And with each challenge, each year, the winners have actually gone on to do amazing things. We had Turtle Tree Lab, which is the alternative cell-based milk company out of here. And then we had Sea Change, which is a company that basically was converting minerals in seawater into construction material. And then last year, we actually had a nature-based solution for the first time, Fair Ventures, which basically has been able to enable a local community to protect their forests and provide livelihoods and generate credits that they could sell on, and to do that actually on a very credible, high quality basis. This year, we've decided to focus on ocean ecosystems, which actually is a very underfunded area. 0.2% of funding goes into the oceans. And Dr. Sylvia she's, a really renowned marine biologist. She was in Singapore earlier this year, and she did this interview with us, and she said, the ocean is climate. And people forget that it is the largest carbon sink, and is at the moment facing pollution, overfishing, and all these different issues. So what we try to do is try and funnel or create the attention in these underfunded areas. We have now also launched a food challenge, food and nutrition, with the Singapore Food Agency, that's looking at alternative protein and different ways of scaling up production and the yield of agricultural land to meet our food security needs. So I think over the years, we've seen some success stories, and not just the winner. We try not to just only support the winner. There's a whole ecosystem of the finalists and the startups that come to us that we constantly matchmake on an ongoing basis. So last year, we actually launched this platform called the SDG Co, which is basically a marketplace and a database for startups and investors. And it's a matchmaking platform. Basically, we're trying to accelerate the time it takes for a startup to find funding, mentorship, board, and so on. And for the investors to, maybe less than 100 coffees before they find that perfect deal, and to be able to invest quickly, because time is of the essence. And we also are very, very conscious that we want to support a very diverse group of founders. And I have to say that the first year was really hard to find like women-led enterprises, and they do face, quite a lot of systemic challenges, Rebecca has mentioned as well. And over the years, we've been very conscious of like every finale, we must have a female founder on stage, because it's just part of that process, but also I think that there needs to be the intentionality there as well. And it's great to see now, the innovations that are emerging and the diversity of founders that are emerging in this space.
I'd like to stay with you, actually. You're saying that it's been difficult to find these solutions, right? Whether it's in Ocean or whether it's women founders. What have you done to reach these founders and reach these startups?
Yeah, I think this is actually an ecosystem issue, right? You need the government, the regulatory bodies to create the right regulatory environment for these startups to thrive. Then you need the support for entrepreneurship. And people who live in Asia, your parents, the last thing they want you to do is entrepreneur, right? It's not a career path that they encourage. But I think that over the years, Asia has been emerging and coming up. We're the most rapidly growing region, with the strongest GDP growth and huge innovation. And I think what's been quite sad is over the last decade, we've seen a lot of the VC money going primarily to Europe and the US. And Asia is seen as like a copier, like the innovations come out, we adopt, we scale here. But what's happening now is we're seeing that the innovations are coming out from here. The microfinance solutions, the climate resilience adaptation solutions, they're all emerging here because this is where the brunt of climate change and the brunt of social inequality is being felt. And that supporting framework or that supporting ecosystem to enable these founders to thrive is so important. And I think in the last 5-10 years, we've seen a huge change in that language and that VC scene and the entrepreneurship scene here in Asia, and that's super encouraging.
With Rebecca, have you seen any challenges as well in your journey as an investor or even philanthropy, right? With your impact that you're trying to make in Africa, what was the biggest challenge that you have faced?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's always the challenge of, just not a match of personalities, not a sincerity about mission, other motives operating around what's said to be the goals. So I think it's just, for me, it's really important I've learned, having got burnt a couple of times, it's just really important to get to know the person you're going to be working with in as a human being, beyond what they offer.
For Mahesh, you have been investing in startups as well for many years. And what has been the biggest challenge, especially with the new venture in climate resilience?
I would say, when you look not just at climate resilience, but the wider impact space, I think the impact investing industry is very, very new, right? So the impact term was coined in 2008, so it's like 15 years old overall. And it's grown over the last 4-5 years. But there's still a lot of misconception about what impact was. If you just look at the previous debate also that happened, the Roma is not an impact investment. I think the underlying tone was the impact investment has to necessarily generate or should not be generating commercial returns. I think one of the biggest challenges for impact investing over the next few years is going to be to emerge out of that shadow and be able to generate commercial returns. And if you need to attract about $1 trillion for the United Nations SDGs, it is very important that it has to come from commercial capital. You cannot get it from concessionary capital. And it is important that we are able to showcase that those kind of returns can be generated by impact investors.
And for the panelists, I want to go back to our topic and our theme, actually, of Daring to Be. You pushed all odds doing what you're doing. And I'm wondering, what has kept you going, right, in all the years that you have been in the space that you are in? Jessica, I'd like to start with you.
That's a tough question. I think if you work in this space there's some mornings you wake up and you're just so depressed at the state of the world. And you're like, what's the point, right? But no, I'm joking. I think, with everything that's going on, the thing that keeps my team going is really the potential and the impact that we can have in terms of what's facing society today. And then how much more that needs to be done is also a motivation in terms of how much capital we can move towards the right areas and what kind of stories that we can publish to hold organizations to account and which boardrooms and which governments we can influence. I think that's kind of the motivation that's driving us.
How do you choose those stories? I'm curious, as a media.
Yeah, this is a very good question. The stories that we publish are always grounded in the truth and accuracy. And everyone has a view of what you can and cannot publish, right? And when you work in sustainability, that's even more so because people are very precious about their reputations and their egos. And we've had quite a few legal letters, issued to us because we've written something that they were not very happy about. But I think that that's the whole point of media. A media that's effective is able to publish uncomfortable truths so that people can do something about it. And for us, of course, we need to be responsible, ensuring that whatever we publish is grounded in truth and data and science. And therefore, we can be really confident that when we publish it, we take a stand. And I think that most publications, most media, most organizations today have to take a stand on issues. This is no longer acceptable to say, I'm neutral, I don't care. And so it's a daily process that happens in the newsroom, and it's quite an interesting one.
For Rebecca, what keeps you going?
Oh, God, that's not difficult. No, I'm just excited by life. I'm excited by opportunities and changes, and and I think I get very energized by feeling that I'm contributing or adding in some way. So I'm fortunate in that way. I don't struggle too much with that. Thank you.
That's a good thing. That's a good thing to feel. But actually then, what change do you want to see in the region? You're passionate about women, passionate about Africa. What change do you want to see?
Well, there needs to be, we need to become a more equal society. I mean, if wholeness is something we're aspiring to, then everybody's got to play an equal part. And, I suppose I heard someone earlier, in one of the discussions say, be careful not to internalize too much, sort of, in a way, be more like a man. And I really feel the opposite way. I feel like the world is out of kilter because we haven't listened to our hearts. And so I think people have to get more courageous about the language of the heart, because I think that's really what the world needs.
I remember attending a conference for the first time after the pandemic, and the entire theme, or not theme, but the entire discussions were all about being a human. And I was just thinking, we're all humans, but yet we need to talk about the fact that we need to go back to being human. And that just baffled me, but also made me realize that, we don't talk about that, right? We don't talk about that. We just go on and talk about...
And also, I think it's quite strategic because, there's an organization out of America called HeartMath, and they've established that the energy field emitted by the heart is so much more powerful than the head. So you must just go where the power is.
We need to invest with the hearts. Yeah. Mahesh, what keeps you going?
See, as an investor, it's easy, all the time you're kind of coming up with founders who are doing brilliant stuff. You kind of get to hear so many brilliant stories, and I've been doing it for 15 years. Never felt tired listening to these stories, except for the last couple of years when you're questioning whether you're on the right side of the table when there is so much money the founders were raising, but I think the balance has always changed. But yeah, so it's great to hear stories, what people are trying to do, and they come up with brilliant ideas. It's always great to see what is happening. It's a great perspective to have.
And we go back to our theme, unleashing your superpower again. And what is that one thing that you want to unleash to the world? Right? You're all very humble, and everyone's saying I don't have a superpower, but you do. But what is that one thing that you want to unleash to the world? If you want to tell the world something, you want to change one thing, what is that? Jessica.
That's a very tough question.
First.
If there's one thing I want to change, well, I think I'll go back to that report that, I mentioned that Kofi Annan launched, right? Which is who cares wins. And I think that a lot of our existing systems today rewards bad behavior, and we work in this area called sustainable finance, which is for me an oxymoron because all finance should be sustainable, right? But it is not. And it's this very extended debate that's happening right now. And even in the US, you see it highly politicized where people are saying, it's wokeism and ESG is, not being true to the purpose of a business, etc. And I think that that's all really misguided because who cares really wins. We can't prosper without the planet prospering without us living in our planetary boundaries. We can't prosper if our neighbors don't prosper. And I think that this, mentality of the dog eat dog world, the capitalist world, that society that we've been brought up, and that business school professors have taught us about the definition of business are all extremely outdated. So I think if, there's one thing that would change, it would be that mindset that, we win if everyone wins, and that is not like a zero-sum game.
Yeah, I've got nothing to add to that.
Mahesh?
See, the one change that I'd like to see, at least from talking from the perspective of the industry, is that impact investing as an industry should become mainstream, right? And it is important from the perspective of the times that we are living in, and there's a long way to go for that to be achieved. And if I can contribute to that in kind of establishing that impact investing is going to generate commercial returns, because essentially it's, and a lot of the times people confuse what exactly impact investing is, but it's just a different lens that you adopt, and you kind of keep the customer at the focus of, at the center of everything when you're looking at impact investing. How are you making a difference to that person's life? And that is where value is generated, and ultimately that should drive the returns for investors as well. So my one change that I'd like to see would be for impact investing to become mainstream.
And what would you all, as a wrap up to this panel, we're talking about daring to be, talking about people with superpowers. What is that one thing or one tip that you would give to someone, right? Especially in this relatively difficult time, what would be that one tip that you would give everyone to just continue, right? Push through, persist in what they're doing? Rebecca?
I just say, listen to your heart.
Listen to your heart.
I would say make connections. I think everyone here today, you're here because of work, maybe friends, but business connection, your professional career, but we are all humans first. And I think connections go a huge way in enabling things to happen. So that would be very similar to what Rebecca said.
Mahesh?
For the times that we're living in, I think resilience would be the right word. From various perspectives, I think what is happening in the overall financial sector, as well as what is happening from a climate perspective, being resilient is very, very important.
Listen to your heart, resilience, and basically unleashing our superpowers to the world. We have a minute, actually. Does anyone want to ask any questions to wrap up our day today? Daring to be. Okay, then that wraps up our panel today. Thank you so much, everyone.